Welcome back to the deep dive.
Good to be diving in again.
So today we're tackling something pretty fundamental, an idea C.S. Lewis really brought into focus.
Absolutely. He looks at these two, well, let's call them odd things about people, about the human race, that most of us just take for granted.
Right, things we experience every day. And he suggests they point towards something, well, quite profound about reality itself.
Exactly. If you follow his logic, it really challenges how you might think about the universe.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What's the first odd thing Lewis talks about?
The first one is that humans everywhere seem to be haunted, is the word he uses, haunted by an idea of how they ought to behave.
Like an internal standard.
Precisely. He calls it different things: fair play, decency, morality, even the law of nature, though he means something specific by that. It's that sense of right and wrong we all seem to have.
Okay, that feeling that, yeah, there's a way things should be done, a standard we should live up to. Makes sense.
We recognize it instinctively almost, across cultures, across time.
But then comes the second odd thing, the punchline, maybe.
Kind of, yeah. The second odd thing is that we don't actually do it. We don't live up to that standard.
We break the rules we somehow acknowledge.
Constantly. Everyone does, to some degree. No one perfectly follows this law they seem to know.
So we know the ought, but live the is not.
That's the gap Lewis focuses on. He argues this isn't just, oh, people aren't perfect. He thinks the very existence of this known but broken standard is evidence for a unique kind of reality.
So his goal isn't really about pointing fingers or assigning blame for the failures.
Not primarily, no. It's more about understanding the nature of the standard itself. What is this thing we feel we ought to follow, yet fail to?
Okay, so how does he explore that? Where does he start?
He starts by drawing a really sharp contrast. He compares this law of human nature, this ought, with the physical laws of the universe, the does.
Like gravity or how weather affects a tree, those kinds of laws.
Exactly. Think about a stone falling or a tree growing. Lewis says a stone or a tree just is what it is.
Right. You don't really say a stone ought to have fallen differently, do you?
No. There's no sense in saying it ought to have been otherwise. If you call a stone the wrong shape for your rock garden, or a tree bad because it doesn't give shade.
You just mean it's inconvenient for you.
Right. You're not making a moral judgment on the stone or the tree. They aren't failing some tree law or stone law.
And Lewis makes a point about how we even talk about these laws, doesn't he? Like saying a stone obeys gravity.
Yeah, he points out that often just means what stones always do. The law is just a description of the observed facts.
It's not like the stone got orders in the morning and decided to follow them.
Precisely. The facts are the law. He even suggests the laws of nature might just mean what nature in fact does. There's no gap between the A's and the ought for a stone.
Okay, so physical laws describe what does happen.
Yeah.
But the law of human nature
is totally different. Because that law, the law of decent behavior, certainly does not mean what human beings in fact do.
Because if it did, well, then anything people do would be considered right.
Exactly. If the law was just what humans do, then betrayal or selfishness would be perfectly fine, morally speaking, because people do those things.
So the law of gravity tells you what stones do if you drop them.
But the law of human nature tells you what humans ought to do, even though they very often don't.
That distinction feels critical. Lewis is saying that with humans, something extra comes into play.
Something else comes in above and beyond the actual facts, is how he puts it. A reality of how we ought to behave, separate from how we do behave.
A standard we carry around, even while ignoring it.
Yes. And because the standard is so persistent, yet so inconvenient, people have tried to explain it away. Lewis tackles some of the main arguments against it being a real, separate thing.
Like what? What's the first pushback he addresses?
The idea that decent behavior is really just what's convenient for me, personally. Self-interest disguised as morality.
That sounds plausible on the surface. I call things good if they help me, bad if they hurt me.
Sure. But Lewis uses a great little thought experiment, the train seat analogy, to poke holes in that.
Oh, right, the train seat. Remind us how that goes.
Okay, so imagine you want a specific corner seat. In one scenario, someone else got there first, fair and square. Annoying for you, but that's life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inconvenient.
In the second scenario, you put your bags down, turn your back for a second, and someone else slips in and takes the seat. Steals it, essentially.
Also inconvenient. Same result for me, no corner seat.
Exactly the same practical inconvenience. But your reaction is completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd be annoyed at the first person, maybe. But I'd be angry, genuinely outraged at the second person. The cheat.
Right. You blame the second man, not the first. This shows your reaction isn't just about convenience, it's about fairness, about justice, about the ought.
It's about how they got the seat, not just the fact that they have it.
Precisely. Lewis sharpens this even more. He points out you get angry with someone who tries to trip you, even if they fail, and you're perfectly fine.
But if someone trips me purely by accident, even if I get badly hurt, once I realize it was an accident, I don't feel that same kind of moral anger towards them.
The intent matters more than the outcome in terms of that moral judgment. It's not just about personal benefit or harm.
That makes sense. He also uses the example of a traitor in wartime, doesn't he?
He does. Think about it. A traitor on the other side might be incredibly useful to your side. You might use the information, pay them well.
But you'd still think they were pretty low.
Exactly. Lewis says even the side benefiting regards the traitor as human vermin. Their usefulness doesn't change the moral judgment that betraying your own side is wrong. Decent behavior isn't just what helps the observer.
Okay, so it's not just about personal convenience. What about when we think about our own actions?
Lewis stresses that true, decent behavior often involves things that actively don't pay off personally, at least not in an obvious way, like being content with a fair wage when you could have cheated to get more, or keeping a really difficult promise that costs you something, or telling the truth even when it makes you look like a fool.
Things that go against immediate self-interest.
Right. We recognize these as morally right, even when they aren't convenient at all.
Okay, so if morality isn't just personal convenience, what's the next argument Lewis tackles?
The argument shifts from personal benefit to collective benefit. Maybe decency is just what's good for the human race as a whole, a kind of social contract.
Like we figured out society works better if we're generally honest and fair, so we promote those behaviors for the greater good.
Lewis actually agrees with the observation. Yes, society does function better with honesty and fairness. Safety and happiness do increase.
There's a but, isn't there?
There is. He says this explanation, why true as far as it goes, just misses the point. It doesn't actually explain the ought.
How so? If it benefits everyone, isn't that a good reason to be moral?
Well, think about the question. Why ought I to be unselfish? If the answer is because it's good for society, Lewis says you can always ask the next question.
Which is?
Why should I care about what's good for society unless it benefits me personally?
And if the only reason I care about society is self-interest, we're back to the first argument we already dismissed.
Exactly. Or the only other way to answer why should I care about society is to say...
Because you ought to.
Right. You just end up restating the very moral obligation you were trying to explain. You're saying you should be unselfish because being unselfish is good. It's circular.
It doesn't give an external reason for the obligation.
Lewis uses a great analogy here of football. If you ask, what's the point of football? And someone says, to score goals.
Okay, that tells me how to play or what defines winning, but not why the game exists or why I should play it.
Precisely. Saying the point of decency is to benefit society is similar. Benefiting society through unselfishness is part of what we mean by decent behavior. You're just defining the game of morality, not explaining the ultimate reason for the rules or why we feel bound by them.
So you're just saying decent behavior is decent behavior, or men ought to be unselfish because, well, they ought to be.
That's Lewis's conclusion on that point. You haven't explained the ought, you've just assumed it.
Okay, so after knocking down those two major explanations, personal convenience and social benefit, where does that leave us regarding this law of human nature?
It leaves us with something pretty stark. This rule of right and wrong, this sense of ought. It's clearly not just a description of how we do behave, like gravity, because we constantly fail it.
Right. And it's not just a personal feeling or fancy we can choose to ignore, because it seems to press on us whether we like it or not. We can't just shrug off guilt entirely.
And as we've just seen, it's not simply a calculation of what's convenient, either for ourselves or for the group.
So, if it's none of those things, what is it?
This is where Lewis makes his big claim. He argues that this rule, this law, must somehow or other be a real thing.
A real thing, meaning?
Meaning something that is really there, objectively existing, not something we just made up inside our own heads or as a society.
Wow. So, like fairness and justice aren't just human ideas, they're part of the fabric of reality.
That's the direction he's heading. It's not a physical object, obviously, but it's nonetheless real. He concludes, we have to admit there's more than one kind of reality.
More than one kind. So there are the physical facts, the airs like rocks and trees and how they behave.
And then there's this other reality, something above and beyond the ordinary facts of men's behavior, but still quite definitely real.
A real law. A real law which none of us made, but which we find pressing on us. That's a powerful idea.
It is. It's this objective standard that exists outside us that we recognize that judges our actions and that highlights this constant gap between what we are and what we feel we ought to be.
So to sum up Lewis's argument here,
Mm.
we've got the laws of nature, like gravity, which just describe what is. They can't be broken in the sense they just state facts.
Right, descriptive laws.
But then we have this unique thing in humans,
Right.
a law of human nature, a moral law, which is prescriptive. It tells us what we ought to do.
And crucially, it's a law we know, we feel the pressure of, yet we consistently break.
That internal conflict, that knowledge of the ought, alongside the reality of the is not, is the core puzzle Lewis presents.
Absolutely. And if he's right, if this moral law is genuinely real, external, and pressing on us, well, that leads to some very big questions.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener.
If Lewis is correct, and there really is this objective law of ought woven into the universe alongside the physical laws of ease, what does that imply about the ultimate source or nature of that universe? What kind of reality includes not just facts, but also binding moral obligations? That's something to really chew on.